I'm going to take Andrew Williams.
Mr. Chairman, I rise to take a call on behalf of New Zealand First in relation to the Taxation, International Investment and Remedial Matters Bill 2012. New Zealand First does support this bill, but as we have said in this House, we have certain reservations and there are some caveats. We heard from the Minister that this is intended to tidy up some of the tax areas internationally to put New Zealand on a level footing with other countries and for there to be a fairer, equitable system for our companies and corporates to operate both onshore and offshore in a globally competitive market. However, we do have reservations, and it has been seen in the past that often where there are such exemptions or allowances, we, the New Zealand taxpayer, and we, the New Zealand government, can sometimes be taken for a ride. We have previous instances where it has been convenient for companies to relocate to other tax jurisdictions to avoid paying their full dues and their full taxes here in New Zealand. And New Zealand First certainly would not want to see this occurring as a result of this International Investment and Remedial Matters Taxation Bill. We can all recall, or those of us who are old enough can recall, from the 1990s what happened through the Weinbock saga, and it was our party, New Zealand First, as you will all recall, and those of you who are old enough, some in the back rows of the government perhaps are not old enough to remember it, but those of you who are old enough will remember that the Right Honourable Winston Peters exposed these very loopholes in this Parliament and New Zealand companies who were trying to evade paying their full dues to the New Zealand Treasury. We cannot go back to those days, Mr. Chairman. We cannot go back to the days where companies hide behind the loopholes, hide behind the convenient bills before this Parliament and acts in this Parliament to secure a preferential situation for themselves in some other tax jurisdiction. Also, Mr. Chairman, as we've seen in recent weeks, there are now more and more, of course, companies who operate in cyberspace, who operate on the internet, who operate in virtual reality. And I'm not talking about the government here, I'm talking about real companies who are operating. And in this respect, Mr. Chairman, we also have a situation where, of course, where the actual company is located these days is often very questionable. While they may be operating on a particular website or an internet site or in some particular cyberspace position, they may not physically actually be within our jurisdiction, but they may be using our jurisdiction for their own convenience. However, New Zealand First is in favour of reformation of our taxation system. We have always said that the long-term objective must be to reduce taxation to New Zealanders. We would like to see all tax laws simplified, and Mr. Chairman, if you'll bear with me, you said you didn't wish to stray into these other areas, but at the same time we must be fair to all taxpayers, and while this bill is aimed at supporting our companies, our exporters, our international trading organisations to be competitive, and investors investing in this country and investing overseas, we must also ensure that we are being fair to the overall tax system. We must ensure that this is not undermining our tax system and is not undermining our government's ability to pay for the health, welfare, education and all the social security systems that are required by the people of New Zealand. So, Mr. Chairman, New Zealand First does support this, but the caveats are it must be fair and it must be a system where corporates are not using it as a convenience to avoid tax. Mr. Chairman, I also note on page 6 of the bill there is a reference to exemption for new residents superannuation schemes and a recommendation from the Select Committee in relation to that. This was another area which I raised in the House last week, that this should not in future just be applying in terms of the corporates of New Zealand, but in the future we need to also be mindful of taxes being paid by particularly many of our immigrants. Mr. Chairman?
Andrew Williams.
Mr. Chairman, we also have to be mindful of those who have immigrated to this country and perhaps have paid into pension schemes in other countries, particularly I am aware of the UK, the Netherlands and other countries where they have been long-term contributors to pension schemes, and where when they come to New Zealand there are difficulties with reciprocal arrangements under our pension schemes in New Zealand. They likewise are being treated unfairly, and New Zealand First certainly will be following through on this, Mr. Chairman. Perhaps we could add it to our super gold card, which is hugely successful, as the government will be aware. Perhaps that could be another situation to be added to the super gold card, where those pensioners who have paid their dues and have paid their rightful taxes in other tax jurisdictions around the world would have access to the same rights and remedies and pensions through the New Zealand system and not be penalised. And likewise in the Pacific, so that they can perhaps take advantage of opportunities to be with their friends, family and whānau and not be penalised as a result. So, Mr. Chairman, while we support this, we do raise some flags of concern. We do say that we will be monitoring it. New Zealand First will be a party that will continue to look at situations like that. We do not want a repeat of the wine box situation in the 1990s. We do not want New Zealand companies to see this as another way of the New Zealand government or the national government helping their mates to get a better deal somewhere else. We do not want to see their mates in some corporates getting a handout or a leg up from this. They've already done very well by their mates with tax deductions and reductions for the select few. We do not want to see this as another situation where National Party mates are benefiting and redirecting their business investments to other jurisdictions where they might be able to save tax. At the end of the day, Mr. Chairman, we do have to make sure that the coffers are full enough to pay for our health, to pay for our welfare, to pay for our education. We cannot allow this to undermine it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Simon Bridges. We haven't had one.
Mr. Chair, well, he's coming soon. But Mr. Chair, I just want to